Most people spend their entire lives trying to change their circumstances without ever changing the hidden force creating those circumstances. They work harder, worry more, chase opportunities, and wonder why the same patterns keep repeating. What they don't realize is that every result in their life was first accepted by the subconscious mind. Your subconscious does not judge. It does not argue. It does not ask whether something is good or bad for you. It simply obeys. And tonight, you are about to discover the 7 forgotten laws that have silently shaped your success, your failures, your relationships, your confidence, your wealth, and your future. Because the moment you understand these laws, you stop living by accident and start creating your destiny on purpose. Your life is not random, it is programmed. Most people spend years asking the wrong question. Why did this happen to me? Why am I stuck? Why does success seem to come easily to other people but not to me? Why do the same problems keep showing up in different forms? Different job. Same frustration. Different relationship. Same disappointment. Different year. Same struggle. And because the faces change, because the circumstances change, because the details change, people assume life is random. But it isn't. Life is patterned. Life is predictable. Life reflects what has been programmed beneath conscious awareness. That's what most people never realize. The subconscious mind is always listening, always recording, always learning, and eventually always expressing. You may believe you are making conscious decisions, but often you are simply acting out subconscious instructions that were installed years ago. Think about that. The way you react to criticism, the way you handle money, the way you approach opportunities, the way you respond to rejection, the way you see yourself. None of these are random. They are conditioned, programmed, repeated, and eventually automated. That's why the first law of the subconscious mind is simple. What is repeated is accepted. Say it again. What is repeated is accepted. Your subconscious mind does not determine whether a thought is true. It determines whether a thought is familiar. And familiarity becomes belief. If a person spends 10 years repeating, "I'm not good enough," the subconscious begins treating that statement as fact. Not because it's true, because it was repeated. If someone constantly says, "Money is hard to make," the subconscious accepts the instruction. Not because it is objectively true, because it was repeated. What is repeated is accepted. That is the key. The subconscious mind learns through repetition. Not logic. Not debate. Not evidence. repetition. The thoughts you think most often become the thoughts you believe most deeply. The thoughts you believe most deeply become the actions you perform most consistently. And those actions become your reality. You have a choice. You can continue feeding the subconscious the same messages, or you can begin feeding it new ones. But understand this clearly. The subconscious is always listening. Even when you are joking, even when you are complaining, even when you are speaking carelessly. Every repeated statement is an instruction. Every repeated emotion is a lesson. Every repeated focus becomes a direction. And eventually, the subconscious follows that direction. That's why some people live inside cycles they don't understand. The cycle isn't happening to them. The cycle is happening through them. Consider someone who constantly struggles financially. Every year they promise things will change. Every year they work harder. Every year they hope for different results. Yet somehow they end up in the same position. The same stress. The same anxiety. The same limitations. Why? Because the outer situation changed. But the inner program remained the same. The subconscious still carries beliefs like, there is never enough. I always fall behind. I can't get ahead. And because those beliefs remain untouched, the results remain unchanged. The pattern is the proof. Say it again. The pattern is the proof. Look at any area of your life. If the same experience keeps repeating, there is likely a subconscious program creating it. Not because you are cursed. Not because the universe is against you. Not because life is unfair. Because the subconscious is faithfully following instructions. The pattern is the proof. Look at relationships. Some people repeatedly attract unavailable partners. Different names. Different appearances. Different circumstances. Same outcome. Again and again. They tell themselves they are unlucky. But often the deeper truth is different. The subconscious carries a hidden belief. Maybe they don't feel worthy of love. Maybe they fear intimacy. Maybe they associate love with pain. And so the subconscious recreates familiar experiences. Not because it wants suffering. Because it wants familiarity. That's the key. The subconscious prefers the familiar over the beneficial. Even when familiar is painful. Even when familiar is destructive. Even when familiar is limiting. The familiar feels safe. And what feels safe gets repeated. The pattern is the proof. Look at emotional patterns. Some people find reasons to worry no matter what happens. Problems disappear. New problems appear. Goals are achieved. New fears emerge. Why? Because anxiety has become programmed. The subconscious has learned to expect danger, so it continues searching for it. Not because danger is everywhere, because the program demands confirmation. The pattern is the proof. This is why awareness matters. Because you cannot change what you refuse to see. You cannot rewrite a program you deny exists. And you cannot create a new future using the same subconscious instructions that created the old one. You have a choice. You always have a choice. You can continue living automatically, or you can begin observing your patterns. Observe your reactions. Observe your assumptions. Observe your emotional habits. Observe your self-talk. Because hidden inside those patterns are the instructions directing your life. The subconscious always leaves clues. And the clues are found in repetition. What is repeated is accepted. The pattern is the proof. Now we arrive at the most important idea of this entire audiobook. Destiny is not created by chance. Destiny is created by conditioning. Most people hear the word destiny and imagine something mystical. Something predetermined. Something outside their control. But the truth is far more practical. Your destiny is largely the result of what has been repeatedly programmed into your subconscious mind. Your beliefs shape your expectations. Your expectations shape your actions. Your actions shape your outcomes. And your outcomes reinforce your beliefs. The cycle continues until someone interrupts it. That someone must be you. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need a dramatic breakthrough. You need awareness. You need discipline. You need repetition. It's not about luck. It's about programming. It's not about wishing. It's about conditioning. It's not about waiting. It's about deliberately installing better instructions. Because once the program changes, the behavior changes. When behavior changes, results change. When results change, life changes. Simple. Not easy, but simple. And that brings us to the central phrase you must remember throughout this entire book. Change the program. Change the outcome. Say it again. Change the program. Change the outcome. Every transformation begins there. Every breakthrough begins there. Every new future begins there. Because your life is not random. It is programmed. And if it was programmed once, it can be programmed again. That realization changes everything. You have identified the hidden force behind your current reality. Now it is time to understand the first mechanism that shapes that reality every single day. Because if programming creates destiny, then belief is the language that programming uses. Change the program. Change the outcome. The law of belief creates your reality. Most people think beliefs are harmless. They think beliefs are simply opinions, ideas, preferences, personal viewpoints. But that is one of the most expensive misunderstandings a person can have. Because beliefs are not opinions. Beliefs are instructions. Read that again. Beliefs are not opinions. Beliefs are instructions. And the subconscious mind follows instructions. Not wishes. Not hopes. Not fantasies. Instructions. That is the law. The subconscious mind does not respond to what you occasionally desire. It responds to what you consistently believe. This is where so many people become frustrated. They say they want success, but secretly believe they are destined to fail. They say they want wealth, but believe money is scarce. They say they want confidence, but believe they are inadequate. And then they wonder why life refuses to change. The answer is simple. The subconscious obeys belief, not desire. That's the key. You can want something with all your heart. But if your subconscious believes the opposite, the belief will win. Every time. Because belief is stronger than wishful thinking. Think about a thermostat. If you set the thermostat to 65 degrees, it doesn't matter how badly you wish the room were 75. The system will continue pulling the temperature back to its programmed setting. Your subconscious works the same way. Your beliefs are the setting. Your reality is the result. And until the setting changes, the results rarely do. You have a choice. You can keep blaming circumstances. Or you can examine the beliefs operating beneath those circumstances. Most people never do. They spend years trying to change the outside world while ignoring the internal instructions creating it. And that is why they remain stuck. Not because they lack intelligence. Not because they lack talent. Not because they lack opportunity. Because they never changed the belief. That's the key. The belief always comes first. Consider the person who believes they are not worthy of success. They may work hard. They may study. They may prepare. But every opportunity will feel uncomfortable. Every achievement will feel temporary. Every success will feel undeserved. Eventually they sabotage themselves. Not consciously, subconsciously, because the subconscious always tries to remain consistent with what it believes. This is why beliefs create reality, not through magic, not through superstition, through behavior. Belief influences action. Action influences results. Results reinforce belief. And the cycle continues. Now think about the greatest athletes in history. Before they became champions, nobody else believed in them. Sometimes not even their families. Sometimes not even their coaches. But they believed. They believed before evidence existed. They believed before trophies appeared. They believed before success arrived. That belief changed the way they trained. It changed the way they recovered. It changed the way they handled setbacks. While others saw obstacles, they saw possibilities. While others quit, they persisted. Because belief gave them access to behaviors that doubt could never produce. That's the key. Belief changes behavior long before it changes circumstances. Look at elite runners, elite fighters, elite competitors. The best among them are not merely physically prepared. They are mentally conditioned. They expect themselves to succeed. And expectation changes performance. Not because success is guaranteed. Because confidence creates commitment. You have a choice. You can wait for evidence before believing. Or you can build belief before evidence arrives. One path creates hesitation. The other creates momentum. History is filled with entrepreneurs who succeeded for the same reason. They believed before the market responded. Before customers appeared. Before investors showed interest. Before anyone applauded. Imagine starting a business when nobody supports you. Imagine working for months without proof that your efforts will pay off. Most people quit. Why? Because they require external evidence before internal commitment. Successful people reverse the process. They develop internal commitment first. Then they create external evidence. That's the key. Belief comes before proof, not after. The entrepreneur who builds something meaningful often spends years operating in uncertainty. Yet they continue. Not because they know the outcome. Because they believe the outcome is possible. And that belief sustains action. The same principle applies to leaders. Every great leader throughout history faced resistance, criticism, doubt, opposition. Yet they continued moving forward. Why? because they believed in a vision others could not yet see. Belief gave them endurance. Belief gave them courage. Belief gave them direction. Understand this carefully. Belief does not guarantee success, but disbelief almost guarantees failure. Because when belief disappears, effort soon follows. When effort disappears, opportunities disappear. When opportunities disappear, results disappear. Everything starts with belief. Now let's talk about the hidden danger most people never notice. Limiting beliefs. These are the invisible ceilings controlling entire lives. The tragedy is that most people don't know they exist. A person may believe they can never earn beyond a certain income. Another may believe healthy relationships are impossible. Another may believe confidence belongs only to other people. These beliefs operate silently, like software running in the background. And because they are invisible, people mistake them for reality. But they are not reality. They are programming. That's the key. A belief is not necessarily true. It is simply accepted. And what is accepted becomes powerful. Think about how many people say things like, "I'm just unlucky. I'm not a natural leader. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm not smart enough. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not capable enough." These statements sound harmless, but the subconscious hears them as commands, instructions, permissions, limits. And once accepted, those limits become self-fulfilling. The person stops trying, stops growing, stops reaching, not because they can't succeed, because they believe they can't succeed. You do not get what you want. You get what you believe. Say it again. You do not get what you want. You get what you believe. This single sentence explains countless outcomes. People want abundance, but believe scarcity. People want confidence, but believe inadequacy. People want success, but believe failure. And the subconscious follows belief. Every time. You have a choice. You can continue reinforcing old beliefs, or you can begin challenging them. Start paying attention to your language. Listen carefully to what you repeatedly tell yourself. Every statement matters. Every assumption matters. Every belief matters. When you catch yourself saying, "I can't," ask why. When you catch yourself assuming failure, question it. When you notice a limitation, investigate it. Most limitations are inherited, learned. conditioned, not factual. It's not about talent. It's about belief. It's not about luck. It's about belief. It's not about potential. It's about belief. Because belief determines whether potential is ever expressed. And that is why this law is so powerful. The subconscious cannot distinguish between a useful belief and a destructive one. It accepts both. It acts upon both. It reinforces both. Your responsibility is to choose wisely. Because every belief becomes a blueprint. Every blueprint influences behavior. And behavior creates results. You do not get what you want. You get what you believe. Never forget that. The person you become tomorrow is being shaped by the beliefs you accept today. Change the belief, and you begin changing the future. Change the instruction, and you begin changing the result. Because beliefs are not opinions. Beliefs are instructions. And the subconscious is always listening. You have discovered how belief shapes reality. Now it's time to understand how beliefs become permanent. Because a belief repeated often enough becomes identity. And the mechanism that creates that identity is repetition. That's the key. The law of repetition rewrites identity. Most people underestimate repetition. They think transformation comes from one breakthrough, one seminar, one book, one motivational speech, one perfect moment of inspiration. But that is not how the subconscious mind works. The subconscious does not change because something is powerful. It changes because something is repeated. That's the key. The subconscious learns through repetition. Not intensity. Not intelligence. Not talent. Repetition. Think about how you learned your name. Nobody sat you down and gave you a lecture. Nobody showed you scientific evidence. You simply heard it over and over again. Eventually, it became part of your identity. The same process shaped your beliefs. The same process shaped your habits. The same process shaped your self-image. And the same process is shaping your future right now. Every thought you repeat becomes familiar. Every emotion you repeat becomes comfortable. Every action you repeat becomes automatic. And eventually, what is automatic becomes who you are. This is why so many people remain trapped. Not because they lack potential. Because they repeat the same mental patterns every day. The same worries. The same doubts. The same fears. The same excuses. The same stories. And every repetition strengthens the program. Every repetition deepens the groove. Every repetition reinforces identity. What you repeat, you become. Say it again. What you repeat, you become. If you repeat thoughts of failure, you become someone who expects failure. If you repeat thoughts of limitation, you become someone who lives within limitations. If you repeat thoughts of confidence, you become someone who acts with confidence. The subconscious doesn't care whether the repetition is positive or negative. It only cares that it is repeated. That's the key. Familiarity becomes reality. Think about how a path forms in a field. The first time someone walks across the grass, there is no trail. The second time, there is a faint mark. The 100th time, there is a visible path. The 1000th time, the path becomes permanent. Your mind works exactly the same way. Every repeated thought creates a mental pathway. Every repeated behavior strengthens that pathway. Eventually, the pathway becomes the default route. And what was once difficult becomes automatic. This is how habits are built. Not overnight. Not through motivation. Through repetition. People often believe habits are created by willpower. They are not. Habits are created by repetition. A person who exercises consistently is not necessarily more motivated than everyone else. They have simply repeated the behavior enough times that it became automatic. A person who saves money consistently is not necessarily more disciplined by nature. They repeated the behavior until it became part of their identity. A person who reads daily, writes daily, practices daily, improves daily. All of them are benefiting from the same law. The law of repetition. What you repeat, you become. Look at someone who constantly says, "I'm always late. I'm terrible with money. I'm not disciplined. I'm bad at relationships." At first, these statements may seem harmless, but repetition transforms them into identity. Eventually, the person stops describing behavior. They start defining themselves. That's dangerous. Because once something becomes identity, the subconscious protects it. The person begins acting consistently with the label. Not because the label is true. Because the label has been repeated. You have a choice. You can repeat limitations. Or you can repeat possibilities. You can repeat weakness. Or you can repeat strength. You can repeat excuses. Or you can repeat responsibility. The subconscious will accept whichever message you deliver most often. That's the key. The subconscious listens to repetition more than intention. Many people intend to change. Very few repeat change consistently enough for it to become permanent. And that is why they remain stuck. They have moments of inspiration, but no system of repetition. They feel motivated on Monday. Forget everything by Friday. Start again next month. Repeat the cycle. Nothing changes. Because transformation is not built through occasional effort. It is built through repeated effort. It's not about motivation. It's about repetition. It's not about excitement. It's about repetition. It's not about talent. It's about repetition. That is the truth most people don't want to hear. Because repetition is boring. Repetition is simple. Repetition lacks drama. But repetition changes lives. Consider a professional musician. People see the performance. They don't see the thousands of repeated practice sessions. Consider a champion athlete. People see the victory. They don't see the repeated training sessions. Consider a successful entrepreneur. People see the success. They don't see the repeated actions performed long before success arrived. Repetition creates mastery. Repetition creates confidence. Repetition creates identity. And identity creates destiny. That's the key. Now let's talk about something most people never use intentionally. Deliberate repetition. This is where transformation becomes possible. Most people repeat negative thoughts accidentally. Successful people repeat empowering thoughts intentionally. That difference changes everything. Imagine starting every day with the same instruction. I am becoming more disciplined. I keep my promises to myself. I act despite fear. I finish what I start. Simple statements. Repeated consistently. Not once. Not twice. Hundreds of times. Over weeks. Over months. Over years. Eventually, the subconscious begins accepting those instructions. Eventually, behavior changes. Eventually, identity shifts. And once identity shifts, transformation accelerates. Because people naturally act in alignment with who they believe they are. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need extraordinary talent. You need repetition. That's the key. If you want confidence, repeat confident actions. If you want discipline, repeat disciplined actions. If you want success, repeat successful behaviors. Stop waiting to feel like the person first. Become the person through repetition. Feelings follow actions far more often than actions follow feelings. This is where most people fail. They wait until they feel ready. They wait until they feel confident. They wait until they feel motivated. But confidence is built through repetition. Motivation is strengthened through repetition. Readiness is created through repetition. The action comes first. The identity comes second. The result comes third. What you repeat, you become. Never forget that. Every day, you are rehearsing a future. Every thought is practice. Every action is practice. Every habit is practice. The question is simple. What future are you practicing? Because whether you realize it or not, repetition is shaping you right now. The subconscious is watching, recording, learning, accepting, and eventually expressing. That is why repetition is one of the most powerful forces in human life. It can imprison you, or it can transform you. You have a choice. Repeat the old story, or repeat a new one. Repeat the old identity, or build a new one. Repeat weakness, or repeat strength. Because what you repeat, you become. And when you become someone new, your reality begins to change. You have now learned how beliefs become permanent. But repetition alone is not enough. There is another force that dramatically accelerates subconscious programming. A force so powerful that a single emotional experience can outweigh hundreds of ordinary thoughts. That's the key. The law of emotion multiplies power. Most people believe thoughts create their lives. That is only partially true. Thoughts matter. Beliefs matter. Repetition matters. But there is another force that determines how deeply those thoughts are embedded into the subconscious mind. That force is emotion. Emotion is the amplifier. Say it again. Emotion is the amplifier. A thought without emotion is often weak. A thought combined with strong emotion becomes powerful. A belief attached to emotion becomes difficult to erase. A repeated thought combined with emotion becomes a subconscious command. That's the key. Emotion is fuel. Emotion is energy. Emotion is the force that tells the subconscious mind. This matters. Pay attention. Remember this. Think about your own life. You probably cannot remember what you ate 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday afternoon. But you can remember a humiliating moment from years ago. You can remember a painful breakup. You can remember a moment of intense fear. You can remember a moment of incredible joy. Why? Because emotion leaves a mark. Emotion stamps experiences into memory. Emotion tells the subconscious that something is important, and the subconscious obeys. This is why two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different programming. One person experiences failure and learns resilience. Another experiences failure and learns fear. The event was the same. The emotional interpretation was different. And that interpretation became programming. That's the key. The subconscious remembers emotion more than information. Most people spend years trying to change their thinking while ignoring their emotional habits. That rarely works. Because emotions strengthen beliefs. Emotions strengthen memories. Emotions strengthen identity. Emotion is the amplifier. Now let's talk about fear. Fear is one of the most powerful emotional forces in the human mind. And because it is powerful, it programs quickly. A single frightening experience can create years of hesitation. A single moment of rejection can create years of self-doubt. A single embarrassing event can create years of insecurity. Not because the event was objectively important, because the emotion attached to it was intense. The subconscious learned the lesson. Unfortunately, the lesson is often wrong. Someone speaks in public and gets laughed at. The subconscious concludes, speaking is dangerous. Someone gets rejected. The subconscious concludes, love leads to pain. Someone experiences failure. The subconscious concludes, trying is risky. And then the person spends years living inside a belief created by a single emotional moment. That's the power of emotion. Fear does not merely influence behavior. Fear programs behavior. You have a choice. You can continue obeying emotional programs created years ago. Or you can examine them, question them, challenge them, replace them. Because many fears are not facts. They are emotional memories. That's the key. Now consider anger. Anger leaves its own imprint. People often believe anger disappears once the moment passes. But the subconscious remembers. Repeated anger trains the mind to look for conflict. Repeated anger trains the nervous system to expect disrespect. Repeated anger trains perception itself. The person begins finding reasons to be angry everywhere. Not because the world changed. Because their subconscious has been conditioned. Emotion is the amplifier. The same principle applies to shame. Shame is one of the most destructive emotional forces because it attacks identity. Fear says, something bad happened. Shame says, "There is something bad about me." That difference is enormous. A child repeatedly criticized may eventually stop hearing the criticism. Instead, they become the criticism. The subconscious absorbs it, stores it, protects it. And years later, that person may still feel inadequate without understanding why. The emotion became the program. That's the key. But here is the good news. The same law that creates limitation can also create transformation. Emotion does not only amplify fear. It amplifies confidence. It amplifies courage. It amplifies gratitude. It amplifies determination. It amplifies belief. Most people unknowingly use emotion against themselves. You are going to learn how to use it for yourself. Because emotion is neither good nor bad. It is fuel. And fuel can power destruction or progress. You have a choice. Now think about confidence. Confidence is not merely a thought. Confidence is an emotional state. And when repeated consistently, that emotional state becomes programming. Consider elite performers, athletes, speakers, leaders. They do not simply think successful thoughts. They repeatedly enter emotional states associated with success. They feel certainty. They feel focus. They feel commitment. Those emotions reinforce behavior. Behavior reinforces results. Results reinforce identity. The cycle becomes powerful. That's the key. Transformation accelerates when thought and emotion work together. A thought says, "I can do this." Emotion says, "I believe it." Together they create momentum. Alone they create hesitation. This is why visualization can be so effective when used correctly. Most people imagine future success like they are watching a movie. Detached, passive, emotionally uninvolved. That approach has limited power. The subconscious responds most strongly when emotion is present. When you visualize success, do not simply see it. Feel it. Feel the confidence. Feel the gratitude. Feel the achievement. Feel the certainty. Emotion is the amplifier. The stronger the emotional involvement, the stronger the subconscious imprint. That's the key. Now let's discuss a practical exercise. Every morning, spend 5 minutes creating an emotional state deliberately. Not accidentally. Deliberately. Think about a moment when you felt strong, capable, confident, focused. Bring that memory to life. Relive it. Strengthen it. Feel it. Allow the emotion to return. Then connect that emotion to your current goals. This is subconscious conditioning. This is emotional programming. And it works because emotion is the amplifier. Likewise, stop feeding emotions that weaken you. Stop rehearsing old humiliations. Stop replaying past failures. Stop reliving old betrayals. Every replay strengthens the program. Every replay reinforces the emotional imprint. Every replay gives energy to the past. You don't need their permission to move forward. You don't need approval from people who doubted you. You don't need validation from those who misunderstood you. What you need is emotional discipline. It's not about feelings. It's about emotional discipline. It's not about avoiding fear. It's about directing emotion. That's the key. The future is being programmed every day. Not only through what you think, but through what you feel repeatedly. Every emotion becomes a signal. Every signal becomes conditioning. Every conditioning becomes behavior. And every behavior contributes to destiny. Emotion is the amplifier. Never forget that phrase. Because once you understand it, you stop becoming a victim of emotional programming. You become the architect of emotional programming. You begin choosing what gets reinforced. You begin choosing what gets strengthened. You begin choosing what becomes permanent. And that changes everything. You have learned that emotion fuels the subconscious mind. But there is another law working quietly beneath the surface. A law that determines what you notice, what you pursue, and what opportunities you recognize. Because the mind does not merely respond to emotion. It responds to expectation. That's the key. The law of expectation shapes what you notice. Most people believe they see reality as it is. They don't. They see reality as they expect it to be. That statement may sound simple, but it explains countless successes and countless failures. Because your brain is not designed to show you everything. Your brain is designed to filter. Every second, millions of pieces of information compete for your attention. Sounds, faces, words, opportunities, threats, possibilities, problems. Your conscious mind cannot process all of it. So the subconscious does something remarkable. It filters reality according to expectation. That's the key. Expectation directs attention. Say it again. Expectation directs attention. What you expect to find often becomes what you notice. What you notice influences what you think. What you think influences what you do. And what you do influences the results you create. Most people never realize they are living inside a reality filtered by expectation. They think they are responding to life. In many cases, they are responding to what they expected to see. Consider a simple example. Imagine buying a new car. Suddenly, you begin seeing that same model everywhere. The cars were always there. But now your attention has been trained to notice them. The reality did not change. Your expectation changed. And that changed your awareness. Expectation directs attention. The same thing happens in every area of life. The person who expects opportunities notices opportunities. The person who expects problems notices problems. The person who expects rejection notices rejection. The person who expects success notices possibilities. Same world. Different expectations. Different outcomes. That's the key. Let's talk about opportunity seekers. You have probably met people like this. They walk into a difficult situation and immediately ask, "What can I learn? How can I use this? Where is the opportunity?" Their lives are not easier. Their challenges are not smaller. Their expectations are simply different. Because they expect opportunities to exist, they actively search for them. And what they search for, they often find. Expectation directs attention. Now compare them to problem seekers. You know these people too. Every situation becomes a complaint. Every obstacle becomes proof that life is unfair. Every challenge becomes a reason to quit. They are constantly scanning for what is wrong. And because they are scanning for problems, they find plenty of them. Again, the world did not change. The expectation changed. The filter changed. The attention changed. And eventually, the results changed. That's the key. The opportunity seeker and the problem seeker may enter the exact same environment. One leaves with possibility. The other leaves with frustration. Not because reality was different. Because expectation directed attention. You have a choice. You can train your mind to search for obstacles. Or you can train your mind to search for solutions. You can focus on limitations. Or you can focus on possibilities. The subconscious will strengthen whichever direction you choose repeatedly. Think about someone starting a new career. If they expect failure, what happens? They notice every mistake. every criticism, every setback, every challenge becomes evidence that they should quit. Eventually they do. Not because success was impossible, because expectation directed attention. Now imagine another person. Same industry. Same challenges. Same obstacles. But they expect growth. They notice lessons. They notice improvements. They notice opportunities. Every setback becomes information. Every mistake becomes feedback. Every challenge becomes training. Eventually they succeed. Again, expectation directed attention. That's the key. What you expect influences what you notice. What you notice influences what you believe. And what you believe influences what you become. This is why expectations are never neutral. They are powerful. They shape perception itself. And perception shapes reality. Now let's go deeper. Expectations do not only influence what you notice. They influence the decisions you make. Imagine someone who expects rejection. Before making a phone call, they hesitate. Before introducing themselves, they overthink. Before taking a risk, they imagine failure. Their expectation changes their behavior. And behavior changes results. Now imagine someone who expects opportunity. They make the call. They start the conversation. They submit the application. They launch the project. They take action. Not because they know they will succeed. Because they expect success to be possible. That's the key. Expectations influence behavior long before outcomes appear. This is why self-fulfilling prophecies happen so often. People unknowingly create the very outcomes they fear. Not through magic. Through expectation-driven behavior. The student who expects failure studies less confidently. The salesperson who expects rejection communicates with less conviction. The entrepreneur who expects defeat hesitates when opportunities appear. Eventually, their expectations become reality. Because expectation directs attention. And attention directs behavior. And behavior directs outcomes. You have a choice. You can expect the worst. Or you can prepare for the best. Notice the difference. This is not about blind optimism. This is not about pretending problems do not exist. This is not about ignoring reality. It's not about fantasy. It's about expectation discipline. That's the key. Successful people are not successful because they ignore challenges. They are successful because they expect solutions to exist. They train themselves to look for answers instead of excuses. They train themselves to look for possibilities instead of limitations. And that mental habit changes everything. Here is a practical exercise. For the next 30 days, pay attention to your expectations. Listen carefully to your internal dialogue. Before a meeting, what do you expect? Before a conversation, what do you expect? Before a challenge, what do you expect? Before pursuing a goal, what do you expect? Your answers reveal the filter shaping your reality. Most people never examine their expectations. They simply live inside them. You are going to challenge them. Every time you catch yourself expecting failure, ask, what else is possible? Every time you catch yourself assuming rejection, ask, what if this works? Every time you catch yourself focusing on obstacles, ask, where is the opportunity? Simple questions. Powerful results. Because questions redirect attention. And attention shapes perception. Expectation directs attention. Never forget that phrase. It may be one of the most important lessons in this entire audiobook. The future you experience is influenced by what you consistently expect today. Not because expectation magically changes reality, because expectation changes awareness. Awareness changes action. Action changes results. And results create the future. You don't need their permission to expect more from life. You don't need proof before adopting a stronger expectation. You don't need certainty before taking action. You need discipline. It's not about luck. It's about expectation discipline. It's not about circumstances. It's about expectation discipline. That's the key. Because every day, your mind is scanning the world for evidence. The question is simple. Evidence of what? Failure? Limitation? Scarcity? Or possibility? Growth? Opportunity? Success? Expectation directs attention, and attention ultimately shapes destiny. You have learned how expectation filters reality. But there is another force even more powerful. A force that silently controls behavior from the inside. Because before you act, before you speak, before you make decisions, there is something else guiding you. An internal picture. A hidden image of who you believe you are. That's the key. The law of mental images controls behavior. Most people believe their behavior determines who they are. In reality, the opposite is often true. Who you believe you are determines how you behave. That's the key. Long before you take action, long before you make a decision, long before you pursue a goal, there is something operating beneath the surface. A mental image. An internal picture. A hidden identity. Every person carries one, whether they realize it or not. Some people see themselves as leaders. Others see themselves as followers. Some see themselves as capable. Others see themselves as limited. Some see themselves as successful. Others see themselves as victims of circumstance. These images are rarely spoken aloud, but they influence everything, because the subconscious mind constantly works to make reality match the image it holds. The mind moves toward the image it holds. Say it again. The mind moves toward the image it holds. Think about someone who secretly sees themselves as confident. Notice how they walk. Notice how they speak. Notice how they handle setbacks. Their behavior naturally aligns with their self-image. Now think about someone who sees themselves as inadequate. Notice the hesitation, the overthinking, the self-doubt, the fear of judgment. Again, the behavior follows the image. That's the key. The self-image is the blueprint. Behavior is the construction project. Most people spend years trying to change behavior without changing the blueprint. And that's why progress feels temporary. Because the subconscious is always trying to return to what feels familiar. Imagine a thermostat once again. If the thermostat is set at 65 degrees, the room always returns to 65. You can temporarily raise the temperature, but eventually the system pulls everything back to the setting. Your self-image functions the same way. If your internal image says, "I am not successful," "I am not attractive," "I am not confident," "I am not disciplined," then even when success appears, the subconscious becomes uncomfortable. Because success now conflicts with identity, and the subconscious hates conflict. That's why people often sabotage opportunities they worked so hard to create. Not because they don't want success. Because success exceeds their self-image. The mind moves toward the image it holds. Consider the person who suddenly receives a promotion. On the outside, it looks like progress. But inside, they still see themselves as unqualified, as undeserving, as incapable. What happens? They hesitate, overthink, second-guess themselves, avoid responsibility. Sometimes they even create mistakes unconsciously. Not because they lack ability, because the self-image has not caught up with reality. That's the key. People do not always rise to the level of opportunity. They often fall to the level of identity. Think about relationships. A person may desperately want a healthy relationship. But if their self-image says, "I am not lovable. I always get hurt. I don't deserve happiness," then they often sabotage the very thing they desire. They push people away, create unnecessary conflict, accept poor treatment, or choose emotionally unavailable partners. Again, not because they want pain, because pain feels familiar, and the subconscious protects familiarity. The mind moves toward the image it holds. This explains something that confuses many people. Why do some people keep repeating the same mistakes? Why do some people keep returning to the same situations? Why do some people continue living beneath their potential? Because identity is stronger than intention. That's the key. You can set goals all day long. But if your self-image contradicts those goals, progress becomes difficult. The goal says one thing. The identity says another. And identity usually wins. You have a choice. You can continue reinforcing an outdated self-image, or you can deliberately create a new one. Because here's the truth most people never hear. Your self-image is not fixed. It is learned, which means it can be changed. The image was created through repetition. It can be rewritten through repetition. The image was conditioned. It can be reconditioned. You don't need their permission. You don't need approval from your past. You don't need validation from people who doubted you. You need a new picture. That's the key. And this is where visualization becomes one of the most powerful tools available. Unfortunately, most people misunderstand visualization. They treat it like fantasy, wishful thinking, daydreaming. That is not what we're talking about. Visualization is identity training. Read that again. Visualization is identity training. The purpose is not merely to imagine having something. The purpose is to imagine becoming someone. That's a completely different process. Most people visualize outcomes. Successful people visualize identities. They imagine themselves becoming disciplined, focused, calm, confident, capable. They rehearse the future version of themselves until it feels familiar. Because familiarity creates acceptance, and acceptance creates behavior. The mind moves toward the image it holds. Here's a practical exercise. Every morning and every evening, spend 5 minutes visualizing your future identity. not your future possessions, not your future achievements, your future self. Ask yourself, how does this person think? How does this person speak? How does this person handle pressure? How does this person respond to setbacks? How does this person spend their time? Then see yourself behaving that way. Clearly, vividly, consistently. Repeat the image daily. The subconscious learns through repetition, and visualization is simply mental repetition. That's the key. The more familiar the image becomes, the more natural the behavior becomes. And eventually, the behavior no longer feels forced. It feels normal. That is when transformation accelerates. Many people wait until reality changes before changing their identity. That approach rarely works. You must reverse the process. Identity first. Reality second. Image first. Behavior second. That's the key. A confident person does not become confident because life becomes easy. They become confident because they repeatedly see themselves as capable. A disciplined person does not wait for motivation. They see themselves as disciplined and act accordingly. A successful person does not wait for permission. They adopt the identity first. Then reality catches up. You have a choice. You can continue rehearsing the old version of yourself, or you can begin rehearsing a new one. Every day, your mind is holding a picture. The question is simple. What picture are you holding? A picture of limitation? Or a picture of possibility? A picture of weakness? Or a picture of growth? A picture of failure? Or a picture of success? Because whether you realize it or not, your subconscious is moving toward that image right now. The mind moves toward the image it holds. Never forget that phrase. It explains why identity shapes behavior, and why behavior ultimately shapes destiny. You have learned how mental images guide action. But there is another force that determines which images grow stronger and which ones fade away. A force that influences every belief, every emotion, and every identity you create. That force is focus. That's the key. Because whatever receives attention gains power. And whatever gains power begins shaping reality. The law of focus expands everything. Most people believe they have an information problem. They don't. They have an attention problem. That's the key. Every day, you are surrounded by opportunities. Surrounded by lessons. Surrounded by possibilities. Surrounded by reasons to grow. And surrounded by reasons to quit. The difference between where you are and where you could be is often determined by one thing: focus. Because whatever receives attention grows stronger. Whatever receives attention gains influence. Whatever receives attention expands. Energy follows attention. Say it again. Energy follows attention. The subconscious mind does not know whether something deserves your attention. It simply strengthens whatever you repeatedly focus on. Focus on problems long enough and problems become larger. Focus on fears long enough and fears become stronger. Focus on possibilities long enough and possibilities begin to multiply. Focus is fuel. And every day, you are deciding where that fuel goes. Most people make this decision unconsciously. They wake up and immediately focus on stress, bad news, conflict, social media, comparison, regret, scarcity. Then they wonder why they feel anxious, why they feel overwhelmed, why they feel powerless. Because focus determines emotional experience. That's the key. Your emotions often follow your focus, not the other way around. Think about this. You can spend 10 minutes replaying a painful memory. Within minutes, your mood changes. Your body changes. Your energy changes. Nothing in your environment changed. Only your focus changed. Now spend 10 minutes reflecting on a meaningful achievement, a moment of gratitude, a lesson learned, a future goal that excites you. Again, your emotional state changes. The environment remained the same. Focus changed. Emotion followed. Energy follows attention. This is why focus is one of the most powerful forces in the subconscious mind. It determines what grows. And whatever grows eventually shapes reality. Now let's compare two people. Both lose a job. Both experience uncertainty. Both face the same challenge. The first person becomes obsessed with the obstacle. They focus on rejection. They focus on what they lost. They focus on the economy. They focus on fear. Every day they replay the same worries. Every day they strengthen the same emotional patterns. Every day their confidence decreases. Eventually they stop seeing possibilities entirely. Not because possibilities disappeared, because their focus eliminated them from awareness. Energy follows attention. The second person experiences the same setback, but they ask different questions. What can I learn? What skills can I develop? What opportunity might exist here? Who can I connect with? How can I use this challenge? Notice the difference. Same event. Different focus. Different emotional state. Different behavior. Different future. That's the key. The obstacle-focused person becomes trapped. The possibility-focused person becomes resourceful. The difference is not intelligence. The difference is focus. You have a choice. You can focus on what is missing, or focus on what is possible. You can focus on what went wrong, or focus on what can be improved. You can focus on what you cannot control, or focus on what you can control. The subconscious strengthens whichever direction you choose repeatedly. Energy follows attention. Look at successful people in any field. They are not immune to problems. They simply refuse to become obsessed with them. They acknowledge problems. Then they redirect attention towards solutions. That is a habit, a discipline, a way of thinking. It's not about positivity. It's about focused discipline. That's the key. Because negativity is easy. Complaining is easy. Blaming is easy. Finding problems is easy. The world offers an unlimited supply of reasons to be distracted, discouraged, and defeated. Anyone can find those. The difficult task is maintaining focus on what matters. The difficult task is protecting attention. The difficult task is choosing deliberately where your mental energy goes. And that is exactly why so few people do it. Think about your daily life. How much attention is being stolen? Notifications, arguments, news cycles, social media feeds, random opinions, endless distractions. Each one pulls attention away from your goals. Each one weakens focus. Each one drains energy. And most people surrender attention without realizing what they are giving away. Because attention is not free. Attention is life force. Attention is creative power. Attention is destiny. Energy follows attention. Never forget that. Where your attention goes consistently, your life eventually follows. This is why focus changes perception. Imagine entering a crowded room. If your attention is focused on judgment, you notice criticism. If your attention is focused on opportunity, you notice connections. If your attention is focused on danger, you notice threats. If your attention is focused on growth, you notice possibilities. The room is the same. The focus changes. And the focus changes reality. That's the key. You do not experience reality directly. You experience reality through attention, and attention determines perception. Perception determines decisions. Decisions determine results. This is why focus also changes performance. Consider an athlete preparing for competition. If they focus on failure, mistakes increase. If they focus on confidence, performance improves. Consider a salesperson. If they focus on rejection, hesitation appears. If they focus on service, communication improves. Consider an entrepreneur. If they focus on obstacles, progress slows. If they focus on solutions, momentum builds. Focus shapes performance because focus shapes behavior, and behavior shapes outcomes. Energy follows attention. Now let's make this practical. For the next week, become aware of your focus. Observe it. Audit it. Question it. Every time you feel frustrated, ask, what am I focusing on right now? Every time you feel discouraged, ask, where is my attention? Every time you feel overwhelmed, ask, what am I feeding mentally? Most emotional states have an attention source. Find the source. Change the focus. Change the state. That's the key. Here is another exercise. At the beginning of each day, identify 3 things that deserve your attention. Not 20. Not 50. 3. 3 priorities. 3 meaningful objectives. Then guard your attention fiercely. Protect it. Direct it. Invest it wisely. Because attention invested consistently becomes progress. And progress builds confidence. You don't need their permission to focus on your goals. You don't need approval to protect your attention. You don't need validation to ignore distractions. You need discipline. It's not about time management. It's about attention management. It's not about being busy. It's about being focused. That's the key. Most people are not defeated by lack of opportunity. They are defeated by scattered attention. Their energy is divided. Their focus is fragmented. Their potential is diluted. And because attention is everywhere, results are nowhere. The focused individual operates differently. They understand a simple truth. Energy follows attention. So they deliberately choose where their attention goes. They feed growth. They feed solutions. They feed possibility. They feed purpose. And over time, those things expand. That is the law. Whatever receives attention grows stronger. Whatever grows stronger influences behavior. Whatever influences behavior shapes destiny. Energy follows attention. Remember that phrase, because it may change the way you live every day. You have learned how focus determines what grows in your life. But there is another force even more personal. A force operating every hour of every day. A voice speaking continuously inside your mind. And whether you realize it or not, that voice is programming your future. That's the key. The law of inner dialogue becomes outer reality. There is a voice inside your head. It speaks from the moment you wake up until the moment you fall asleep. It comments, judges, predicts, complains, encourages, discourages, questions, explains. And whether you realize it or not, that voice is shaping your future. Most people spend more time talking to themselves than they do talking to anyone else. Yet they pay almost no attention to what is being said. That's the key. The most influential conversation in your life is the conversation happening inside your own mind. Because every repeated statement becomes instruction. Every instruction becomes conditioning. Every conditioning becomes behavior. And behavior becomes destiny. Your inner voice becomes your outer life. Say it again. Your inner voice becomes your outer life. Most people think self-talk is harmless. They believe it is just mental noise, random thoughts, private observations, nothing important. But the subconscious mind does not see it that way. The subconscious listens, records, learns, accepts. The words you repeat internally become commands. And eventually, those commands become reality. Think about how many people begin their day. I'm tired. I'm stressed. Nothing ever works out. I'll probably fail. I'm not ready. I can't handle this. The subconscious hears every word, not as commentary, as instruction. That's the key. Your subconscious does not care whether a statement is spoken aloud or silently. Repeated language becomes programming, and programming creates outcomes. Imagine a person who spends years saying, "I'm terrible with money." Eventually, they stop seeing financial opportunities. They avoid learning, avoid responsibility, avoid growth. The statement becomes identity. Now imagine another person who constantly says, "I always mess things up. I ruin everything. I can never get it right." At first, these are merely words. Over time, they become beliefs, then behaviors, then results. And suddenly the person has created evidence for the very story they have been repeating. Your inner voice becomes your outer life. That's the key. Most people are not defeated by external enemies. They are defeated by internal conversations. The critic inside their mind becomes stronger than any obstacle outside of it. And because the critic speaks constantly, the subconscious begins accepting its version of reality. That is why destructive self-talk is so dangerous. It does not remain mental. It becomes behavioral. Consider someone who constantly tells themselves, "Nobody respects me." Notice what happens. They enter conversations expecting disrespect. They become defensive, sensitive, suspicious. Eventually, they create tension where none existed. And then they use the tension as proof they were right. The inner dialogue created the outer experience. Now consider someone who constantly says, "I am capable. I can learn. I can improve. I can figure this out." Notice the difference. The same challenges appear, but the response changes. Confidence increases. Persistence increases. Action increases. And results begin to improve. Again, the inner dialogue becomes the outer reality. That's the key. The subconscious listens most closely to repetition. And most people are repeating limitations, not possibilities. Excuses, not solutions. Fear, not growth. Every day they rehearse failure. Every day they reinforce doubt. Every day they strengthen weakness. Then they wonder why confidence never appears. Confidence cannot grow in an environment saturated with self-criticism. You have a choice. You can continue speaking to yourself carelessly, or you can begin speaking to yourself deliberately. Most people would never allow another person to speak to them the way they speak to themselves. Think about that. If someone followed you around all day saying, "You're not good enough. You'll fail. Why even try? You always make mistakes," you would recognize that person as destructive. Yet many people allow that exact voice to operate inside their own minds every day. That's the key. The greatest bully in your life may not be another person. It may be your own internal dialogue. And until that dialogue changes, transformation becomes difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. Because the subconscious follows the dominant voice. Now let's talk about deliberate self-command. This is where everything changes. Deliberate self-command means becoming the conscious author of your inner dialogue. Not reacting. Not drifting. Not repeating old programming. Creating new programming. Purposefully. Intentionally. Consistently. Your inner voice becomes your outer life. So if you want a different life, begin with a different voice. Every time you catch yourself saying, "I can't," replace it with, "I can learn." Every time you catch yourself saying, "This is impossible," replace it with, "There must be a way." Every time you catch yourself saying, "I always fail," replace it with, "I improve every time I try." Simple changes. Powerful consequences. Because language shapes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior shapes results. That's the key. Now understand something important. This is not about lying to yourself. It is not about pretending challenges do not exist. It is not about blind positivity. It is about conscious direction. It's not about fantasy. It's about self-command. It's not about wishful thinking. It's about self-command. That's the key. You are teaching the subconscious how to interpret reality. You are choosing the instructions it receives. And over time, those instructions become automatic. Imagine waking up every day and deliberately repeating, "I keep my promises to myself. I stay calm under pressure. I solve problems. I finish what I start. I become stronger every day." At first, the statements may feel unfamiliar. Good. Unfamiliar means new. New means change is happening. Keep repeating them. Keep reinforcing them. Eventually the subconscious accepts them. Eventually behavior aligns with them. Eventually identity reflects them. Your inner voice becomes your outer life. Never forget that phrase. Now let's discuss one of the most important habits you can develop. Observation. Before you change your inner dialogue, you must become aware of it. Most people are unconscious of what they say to themselves. The words flow automatically. The criticism runs continuously. The assumptions go unquestioned. You must interrupt that pattern. For the next 7 days, pay attention. Listen. Observe. Notice recurring phrases. Notice recurring assumptions. Notice recurring complaints. Write them down. Expose them. Because awareness is the beginning of transformation. You cannot change what you refuse to observe. That's the key. When you hear a destructive statement, stop. Question it. Ask yourself, is this actually true? Or is it simply a repeated story? Many limitations survive only because they are never challenged. The moment you question them, their power begins to weaken. The moment you replace them, a new program begins to form. You don't need their permission to change your internal dialogue. You don't need approval to think differently. You don't need validation to speak to yourself with strength. You have a choice. Every thought is a vote. Every statement is a command. Every internal conversation is shaping the future version of you. The question is simple. What future are your words creating? Because whether you realize it or not, the voice inside your head is building your reality every day. Your inner voice becomes your outer life. And once you master that voice, you gain influence over nearly every area of your experience. But there is one final law still waiting. A law that sits beneath belief, repetition, emotion, expectation, focus, self-image, and inner dialogue. A law that quietly determines the future before it arrives. That's the key. Because people do not merely react to life. They act from assumptions about life. And those assumptions shape everything. The law of assumption creates the future. Long before an action is taken, a decision is made. Long before a decision is made, a belief is activated. And long before a belief produces a result, an assumption quietly shapes the entire process. Most people never notice this. They see outcomes. They see behaviors. They see consequences. But they never examine the assumptions operating beneath them. That's the key. Every action begins with an assumption. Every choice begins with an assumption. Every success and every failure is influenced by an assumption. And because assumptions operate silently, they often control lives without being questioned. Assume differently. Live differently. Say it again. Assume differently. Live differently. Think about how you approach a challenge. Before you take the first step, what are you assuming? Are you assuming success is possible? Or are you assuming failure is inevitable? Are you assuming people will help you? Or are you assuming people will reject you? Are you assuming growth is available? Or are you assuming limitations are permanent? Your answers matter. Because assumptions influence behavior long before reality provides evidence. That's the key. The subconscious mind treats assumptions like instructions. It organizes attention around them. It shapes emotional responses around them. It influences decisions around them. And eventually, it creates outcomes that reinforce them. This is why assumptions are so powerful. Most people don't act according to facts. They act according to assumptions about the facts. Imagine two people walking into the same room for a job interview. The first person assumes, "They probably won't hire me. I'm not qualified enough. There are better candidates." Immediately, their behavior changes. Their posture changes. Their voice changes. Their confidence disappears. They hesitate, overthink, second-guess every answer. Their assumption begins creating the outcome they fear. Now consider the second person. They walk into the same room, facing the same interview, facing the same uncertainty. But they assume something different. "I belong here. I can contribute. I am capable. I have something valuable to offer." Notice what happens. Their energy changes. Their communication improves. Their confidence becomes visible. Their actions align with possibility. Again, the assumption shapes the behavior. That's the key. The assumption comes first. The result comes later. And this principle appears everywhere. Confident people often assume possibility. Fearful people often assume failure. This does not mean confident people never experience fear. It means they refuse to let fear become the dominant assumption. That difference changes everything. Assume differently. Live differently. Most people wait for proof before adopting empowering assumptions. But successful people understand something important. The assumption itself often helps create the proof. Think about an entrepreneur launching a business. There are no guarantees. No certainty. No promise of success. Yet they move forward. Why? Because they assume success is possible. Not guaranteed. Possible. That single assumption changes behavior. It creates persistence. Creates courage, creates initiative, creates resilience. Without that assumption, action never begins. That's the key. Possibility creates movement. Fear creates paralysis. Now think about someone trapped in negative assumptions. Every opportunity is viewed with suspicion. Every challenge is viewed as a threat. Every setback becomes evidence that life is unfair. Over time, these assumptions become automatic. The person stops questioning them. Stops examining them, stops noticing them. And that is where the danger begins. because unexamined assumptions become invisible prisons. You have a choice. You can live inside assumptions created by your past, or you can consciously create assumptions that support your future. Most people never realize this option exists. They inherit assumptions from parents, teachers, friends, society, past failures, past disappointments, and then spend years living according to those assumptions, without ever asking whether they are true. That's the key. Many assumptions feel true simply because they are familiar, not because they are accurate. A person assumes, "I'm bad with money." Where did that assumption come from? A person assumes, "I'll never be successful." Based on what? A person assumes, "People like me don't achieve great things." Who decided that? Most assumptions collapse under examination, but only if they are challenged, only if they are questioned, only if they are brought into awareness. Assume differently. Live differently. This is not positive thinking. It is strategic thinking. It is not about pretending reality is different. It is about choosing assumptions that create useful behavior. That's the key. The assumption, "I can learn," creates different behavior than, "I'll never figure this out." The assumption, "There is a solution," creates different behavior than, "This is impossible." The assumption, "I can improve," creates different behavior than, "This is just who I am." Small assumptions, massive consequences. Because assumptions influence effort. Effort influences results. Results influence identity. And identity shapes destiny. Now let's discuss a practical exercise. For the next 7 days, pay attention to your automatic assumptions. Notice how often they appear. Before a conversation, before a challenge, before a goal, before a decision. Ask yourself, what am I assuming right now? Be honest. No judgment. Just awareness. You may discover assumptions you didn't know existed. Assumptions about money, relationships, success, health, confidence, opportunity, growth. Awareness is the first step. Because you cannot change an assumption you refuse to see. That's the key. Once you identify a limiting assumption, replace it. Not with fantasy, with possibility. Replace. I'll probably fail. With, I can learn from this. Replace, there is no opportunity. With, I may not see the opportunity yet. Replace, this won't work. With, there may be a way. Simple shifts. Powerful results. Because assumptions shape perception. Perception shapes action. Action shapes reality. You don't need their permission to adopt a stronger assumption. You don't need validation to believe growth is possible. You don't need proof before choosing a more empowering perspective. You have a choice. And that choice exists every day. Every challenge presents it. Every setback presents it. Every opportunity presents it. Will you assume limitation or possibility? Will you assume defeat or growth? Will you assume scarcity or opportunity? Because your assumptions are quietly creating your future, whether you are aware of them or not. Assume differently. Live differently. Never forget that phrase. It may be one of the most practical laws in this entire audiobook. Because assumptions are not predictions. They are instructions. And the subconscious follows instructions. The future is often shaped long before it arrives. Not by fate. Not by luck. Not by chance. But by the assumptions you choose repeatedly. You have now discovered 9 powerful laws of the subconscious mind. Yet there is one final law that sits above them all. A law that determines whether these principles become temporary knowledge or permanent transformation. Because beliefs, repetition, emotion, focus, self-image, inner dialogue, and assumptions all point toward one thing. Identity. That's the key. The person you believe you are ultimately determines the life you create. And that is where we are going next. The law of identity determines destiny. For the last 9 chapters, we have explored the hidden laws that shape human behavior. Belief, repetition, emotion, expectation, mental images, focus, inner dialogue, assumption. Each one is powerful. Each one influences the subconscious mind. Each one helps determine the direction of your life. But all of them ultimately point towards something greater. Identity. That's the key. Identity sits above goals, above habits, above motivation, above temporary emotions. Because people do not consistently act according to what they want. They act according to who they believe they are. Read that again. People do not consistently act according to what they want. They act according to who they believe they are. That is why identity is the most powerful force in personal transformation. Your identity is your destiny. Say it again. Your identity is your destiny. Most people spend their lives chasing outcomes. They want more money, better relationships, greater confidence, more success, better health. But they rarely stop to ask the most important question. Who must I become to create those outcomes naturally? Because the truth is simple. Outcomes are temporary. Identity is foundational. A goal may motivate you for a few weeks. Identity can guide you for a lifetime. That's the key. Think about someone who says, "I want to get fit." That is a goal. Goals are useful, but goals alone are fragile. Now compare that to someone who says, "I am the kind of person who takes care of my body." That is identity. Notice the difference. One focuses on a result. The other focuses on becoming. The goal creates effort. The identity creates consistency. And consistency changes lives. Your identity is your destiny. Most people fail because they try to force behaviors that conflict with identity. They attempt discipline while secretly believing they are lazy. They attempt confidence while secretly believing they are inadequate. They attempt success while secretly believing they are destined to fail. The behavior fights the identity. And identity usually wins. That's the key. The subconscious always seeks consistency. If you believe you are careless, you will act carelessly. If you believe you are disciplined, you will naturally move toward disciplined behavior. If you believe you are resilient, setbacks lose their power. If you believe you are capable, challenges become opportunities. Identity influences everything. Now let's examine transformation. Real transformation does not begin when circumstances change. It begins when identity changes. Consider the person who overcomes addiction. The breakthrough rarely occurs because they simply stop the behavior. The breakthrough occurs when they stop seeing themselves as the person who needs the behavior. Identity changes first. Behavior follows. Consider the entrepreneur who creates success after years of struggle. The transformation often begins when they stop identifying as someone hoping for success and start identifying as someone capable of creating it. Again, identity changes first. Behavior follows. Consider the shy individual who becomes a confident speaker. The change does not happen because fear disappears. The change happens because they begin seeing themselves differently. They adopt a new identity, and the subconscious starts aligning behavior with that identity. That's the key. Identity is the root. Everything else is the fruit. Most people try to change the fruit. Very few change the root. You have a choice. You can continue managing symptoms, or you can transform identity. You can continue chasing results, or you can become the person who naturally produces those results. The second path is slower at first, but far more powerful in the long run. Because identity creates sustainability. Identity creates consistency. Identity creates destiny. Your identity is your destiny. Now let's bring everything together. Think back to the first law. Belief. What do beliefs ultimately create? Identity. Think about repetition. What does repetition strengthen? Identity. Think about emotion. What does emotion reinforce? Identity. Think about expectation. What does expectation support? Identity. Think about mental images. What do mental images shape? Identity. Think about focus. What does focus feed? Identity. Think about inner dialogue. What does inner dialogue program? Identity. Think about assumptions. What do assumptions influence? Identity. Every law in this audiobook points toward the same destination. The person you believe yourself to be. That's the key. Your subconscious is constantly answering one question. Who am I? Every thought contributes to the answer. Every action contributes to the answer. Every habit contributes to the answer. Every emotional pattern contributes to the answer. And once the answer becomes established, behavior follows automatically. This is why identity is so powerful. You do not need to force what feels natural. And identity determines what feels natural. The disciplined person does not constantly fight discipline. The disciplined person sees discipline as part of who they are. The confident person does not constantly fight confidence. Confidence feels natural because it aligns with identity. The successful person does not constantly chase success. Their behaviors naturally support it because success aligns with identity. That's the key. So how do you change identity? The answer is surprisingly simple. Not easy, but simple. You begin acting like the person you intend to become before the evidence appears. You repeat new beliefs. You reinforce new assumptions. You practice new behaviors. You create new emotional associations. You build new mental images. You direct new focus. You establish new inner dialogue. Day after day. Week after week. Month after month. Until the new identity becomes familiar. And what becomes familiar becomes accepted. What becomes accepted becomes automatic. What becomes automatic becomes destiny. Your identity is your destiny. Never forget that phrase, because it summarizes everything in this audiobook. Most people wait for their lives to change before changing themselves. You must reverse the process. Change yourself first. Change your identity first. Change your internal world first. And then watch your external world begin to respond. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need certainty. You need commitment. It's not about motivation. It's about identity. It's not about wishing. It's about identity. It's not about luck. It's about identity. That's the key. Every day, you are becoming someone. The question is whether that process is happening by default or by design. Will you continue carrying an identity built by old fears? Old failures? Old limitations? Or will you deliberately create a new one? You have a choice. Because destiny is not hidden somewhere in the future. Destiny is being created right now. In your thoughts. In your actions. In your assumptions. In your focus. In your identity. And once identity changes, everything changes. Your identity is your destiny. That is the final law. And it is the law that gives meaning to all the others. Now that you understand the hidden laws of the subconscious mind, the responsibility is yours. The program can remain the same, or it can be rewritten. The future can remain familiar, or it can become extraordinary. The choice, as it always has been, belongs to you. For the last hour, you have discovered something that most people never understand. Your life is not controlled by luck. It is not controlled by circumstances. It is not controlled by other people. It is controlled by the hidden laws operating inside your subconscious mind. The law of belief. The law of repetition. The law of emotion. The law of expectation. The law of mental images. The law of focus. The law of inner dialogue. The law of assumption. And ultimately, the law of identity. Every thought you repeat. Every emotion you feed. Every image you hold. Every word you say to yourself. every assumption you accept. Together, they are building the person you become. The question is no longer whether your subconscious is creating your future. The question is whether it is creating the future you want. Starting today, observe your thoughts. Guard your beliefs. Choose your focus. Command your inner dialogue. And build a new identity deliberately. Because the moment you change what is happening inside you, the outside world begins to change as well. Your challenge is simple. For the next 30 days, act as the person you intend to become before the evidence appears. Not for one day. Not when you feel motivated. Every single day. Because destiny is not discovered. Destiny is programmed.